Now, did France make headlines for the wrong reasons last year? Paris attacks took the limelight as far as the year 2015 was concerned, and then we saw the climate change talks taking place also in France, Paris. We saw President Macron also attending the Paris talks in terms of climate change. Now, where does France stand in terms of its future? Terrorist attacks, what is in store for France in the next 1 year? Joining us this evening is the ambassador of France in Sri Lanka, Mr. Yon Marine Shu. I hope I pronounced your name right. A very good evening and welcome to the show, Mr. Shu.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Starting off, tell us a little bit about France. Paris attacks, are you all ready to prevent such attacks in the future? Where does your country stand right now?
Of course, we will do our best for these attacks never happen again. These attacks have been planned in Syria by people of Daesh. And so, with our allies, we will try our best to suppress the threat at the origin in Syria itself and in Iraq itself also. But these attacks have been prepared also in Brussels, and so that's why in a neighboring country. And therefore, we will do our best to strengthen intelligence sharing with our neighbors, with our allies in this war against terrorism. But these terrorists were, many of them, French. That's why we have and we are enhancing and strengthening security in France. State of urgency has been declared immediately in the aftermath of these terrorist attacks in order to ease the work of the police in France, and 3,000 military and police have been deployed in and around Paris. But you know, these terrorist attacks are worldwide right now. Look at what happened recently in Western Africa, in Ouagadougou last week, in Bamako immediately after the attacks in Paris, but also in Southeast Asia, in Jakarta, and in Europe as well, with in Istanbul, and with the threats also in Germany, UK, and Belgium. That's why, I mean, this is a worldwide problem.
Your head of state, Mr. François Hollande, was attending India's Republic Day ceremony, which was happening on Tuesday. How significant is this for a country like France, attending a Republic Day event in India, saying that they are ready and committed to move forward in terms of eradicating terrorism? How significant is this for France?
I mean, it is significant because India is a very strong partner for France for the last, let's say, for the last 20 years, and we have today a strategic partnership with India, which means that we have reinforced dialogue on security matters, that we have also a strong cooperation in terms of energy, and particularly in terms of nuclear energy. And we have also a strong partnership in terms of security, but on the side of armament and everything related to defense. But we recently we added a fourth pillar, which is space, because you know that India is a space power, and so we develop a kind of partnership with them regarding this. And of course, we try to develop our trade relations with them. But the bulk of it is the political dialogue and the security dialogue with them, and for the last 20 years.
France is now a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Let's talk about India. Will your government support India coming in as a permanent member of the UN Security Council?
Definitely, definitely. It is our position for the last 10 years. I mean, and so always we support and we supported this position for India to become a permanent member of the Security Council.
Let's talk about what happened in Paris in terms of the support rendered by Sri Lanka. When this tragedy took place, many individuals across the world came on board, supported France, supported Paris, supported the cause to eradicate terrorism. How do you view the support rendered by the Sri Lankan populace living in France in terms of the attack?
I mean, first we were deeply touched at the embassy by the numerous messages of support we received from every circle in Sri Lanka. We opened a condolences book immediately after the attack at the embassy for 3 days, and we received lots of people there. In the morning following the attacks in Paris, I received so many calls, I mean, from Sri Lankan authorities, first, but also coming from politicians, businessmen we are engaged with, and common people who were very willing to express their solidarity with us and their support to us.
In terms of, Mr. Ambassador, in terms of ensuring that such attacks does not recur in your country again, Sri Lanka can give you all lessons in terms of eradicating terrorism, because Sri Lanka successfully eradicated terrorism in the year 2009. Can you learn anything from the Sri Lankan experience? I mean,
we received many sympathy messages from Sri Lankan ministers and authorities. I mean, again, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sri Lankan Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sri Lankan Minister of Defense, and Sri Lankan Minister of Law and Order immediately called me after the terrorist attacks. But regarding assistance, after the attacks, as I said before, we are strengthening intelligence sharing, firstly, with our neighbors, because the attacks have been prepared in the vicinity of France. And we are also strengthening our cooperation with our allies against Daesh in Syria and Iraq. That's the two fronts. So intelligence sharing with our neighbors, and then with our allies on the war theater in Syria and Iraq.
Liberty and freedom are important components as far as your country is concerned. France has come forward and it's calling about 90 countries to sign the ratification of the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. Now, Sri Lanka is somewhat in the spotlight in terms of enforced disappearances over the last few years or so. How do you view the French government's position when you are brought in this ratification, the International Convention in question, Mr. Ambassador?
I mean, regarding Sri Lanka, France congratulates, of course, welcomes, Sri Lanka for signing this international convention for the protection of all persons from enforced disappearances. This ratification was, I think, in December 2015. And so we consider it as a landmark in terms of respect of human rights. But after that, it is up to every country to define and precise their own way to do it, according to the convention itself.
How many countries have ratified the convention in question so far, Mr. Ambassador?
It is around 90 or so, yeah.
How do you intend to get more countries to sign this ratification in question?
This convention is a UN convention. It's not a French convention, it's a UN convention. So
supported by the French government.
So as a permanent member of the Security Council, of course we are very happy, to see another country to ratify it, and we are always willing to promote it. But then, as I said, it is up to every country to define how they will deal with it, how they will conform to it, according to the convention itself. The French government's position in the Security Council. We spoke of the conditions of the Security Council, your government being able to bring in a resolution in question, that is the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. What is your position right now on Syria, Mr. Ambassador? Your country's position on Syria? You mean on Syria? We have a war, a civil war there, and so we have an enemy who is Daesh, and so and a civil war. So first we have to deal with the enemy, with Daesh, because they hit our country. They hit our country in December, but before also. So with our allies, I mean, we have to do something. We have to suppress these threats in Syria and also in Iraq.
Who's the enemy? Is it the Syrian government or is it the Syrian anti-rebel forces?
Daesh.
The Daesh is the
Since these
enemy.
people recognize the attacks to have been planned in Syria by them.
What is the future in terms of combating terrorism in a country like Syria? Now, France has been coming to the limelight, coming to the forefront in terms of eradicating terrorism, eradicating the Daesh in Syria. Where do you see the future, Mr. Ambassador, in terms of Syria?
We hope. I mean, we are advocating for Syria a political solution for the last, let's say, for the last 3 years. I mean, at the right beginning of the civil war in Syria, we were among the first to advocate a political solution for them. And so we are keeping on, I mean, advocating this political solution to come. That will be the only solution for Syria. But regarding this military, this security threat of Daesh, we have to suppress it with our allies, of course.
Mr. Ambassador, do you see a tug of war between the US and Russia in terms of Syria? Or do you see all countries uniting for a common cause at the moment?
I see these countries, I mean, to have the same target for the time being, and the target is this jihadism, this radicalism, and which is a threat, I mean, for everybody.
Why is Russia and China always split from the other veto countries in the Security Council, Mr. Ambassador? What is the reason behind this? We've seen this for many, many decades. Russia and China takes one end of the rope, and all the other countries take another end of the rope. What is happening in the UN Security Council itself? Why cannot a common consensus be reached?
But regarding Syria, I mean, I see a consensus. I mean, I see a political consensus of it.
Well, we saw what happened in Libya. We saw what happened.
The consensus is, I mean, to suppress the threat, and so Russia is now, I mean, doing the same job as we are. So to suppress the threat of Daesh.
Mr. Ambassador, you were in Paris for the climate change talks. So one of my colleagues also met you in Paris with President Maithripala Sirisena. What steps is France taking to keep and uphold the terms of the agreement? We saw many days took place for a final conclusion to come through in terms of the climate change talks. What would France do in terms of upholding this agreement in question?
Yeah, I mean, first we're of course very happy to host this COP21 climate change conference. It was a political and a logistical challenge for us, since we welcome 40,000 delegates and visitors to Paris. It was a successful conference, and with the agreement of on global warming, and this agreement leads to a kind of energy revolution, and very concrete revolution. So, of course, we were very happy to see President Sirisena to be in Paris for the high-level segment of this conference, the first day that was for the heads of state of every country to be there. So we were very happy to see President Sirisena in Paris. We will, of course, I mean, continue to play an active role in the real environmental diplomacy, since the French Minister of Foreign Affairs will keep on to preside the COP21 up to the next conference in Morocco, which will be the COP22 next October, next autumn. For France, you know that we have one of the lowest level of greenhouse gas emissions, I mean, among the developed countries. And thanks to our hydroelectricity and nuclear energy programs, which make the bulk of our energy mix. And so we are, of course, developing fastly renewable energy as well, like mainly solar and wind energy in our energy mix, in order to reduce further gas, petroleum and coal consumption. Sri Lanka is also clearly a very low emitter of greenhouse gases.
How do you view President Maithripala Sirisena's commitment to protect the environment in terms of COP21?
I mean, we are very happy to hear, I mean, the speech of and the engagement of President Siriseena to do it. As I said, Sri Lanka is clearly a very low emitter of greenhouse gases, but the island is particularly vulnerable to climate change in terms of, let's say, rising sea levels, increasing recurrence of natural disaster. And we will do our best. We will try to help Sri Lanka in order to we will work with Sri Lanka on a green agenda. Our developing agency, Agence Française de Développement, French agency for development, is already working with Sri Lankan authorities on green agenda financing projects related to climate change. They started to work with post-tsunami projects in 2004, and today they are mainly focused in Sri Lanka, working on projects related to water management, water supply, and also projects related to enhancing efficiency of the grid and energy efficiency. So,
Paris has always been positioned as a global tourist destination. You just said, Mr. Ambassador, that you all had approximately around 86 million tourists visiting your country just last year alone, which is a very huge number in terms of tourist arrivals. What lessons can Sri Lanka learn from the French experience?
It is difficult to speak about experience or so on, because France is peculiar. It is in Western Europe. So, but Sri Lanka has clearly, I mean, a lot of has three pillars. Let's say the first pillar is the beauty of the beaches, the ocean, the Indian Ocean, and the second pillar is unspoiled nature. Like Sinaraja forest and everything around the hilly country in the middle of the country. And the third pillar is heritage. So what you call the cultural triangle, Dambulla, Kandy up to Sigiriya. So clearly, in order to develop tourism in Sri Lanka, first, the best way is to preserve this unspoiled environment and these unspoiled beaches, and then to develop also infrastructure, especially with the north and eastern coast, because eastern coast has very big potential in terms of tourism.
Mr. Ambassador, you spoke of infrastructure development. Sri Lanka is in a dire need of foreign direct investment right now to uplift the country's economy. How do you think France can help Sri Lanka grow and attract FDIs?
So there are mainly two ways to do it. The first way is the French Development Agency. So, as I said before, the French Development Agency is mainly focused first on the water supply, then wastewater management, and then urban development, which means transport, garbage, and so on. So, regarding this, I mean, we are currently working on several projects all around the country. So that's the first thing, the agency. And then regarding private investments, I mean, of course, we are mainly focused on fields where France is renowned for its, let's say, expertise. Much probably, French companies will be keen to invest in the foreseeable future in the tourism sector, let's say. And because we have expertise there, and because we think that there is a huge potential there. But the health sector is also a sector where we are very much interested in. You know that every year we give as a grant to Sri Lanka around 12 million euros through the Global Fund in order to eradicate malaria, TB, and AIDS. And you know also that Sanofi, which is famous French brand for pharmaceutics, has put on the market last week the first vaccine for dengue. And this vaccine has been certified already by Mexico, Brazil, and the Philippines. So we hope these companies to work further with Sri Lanka.
Mr. Ambassador, we spoke of the Paris attacks, we spoke of FDIs, we spoke of the climate change talks that took place in your country last year. I want to move on to something very light now. You've been in Sri Lanka for the last 9 months, and you've been spotted quite a few times down south in the beaches. What is your fondest memory of Sri Lanka so far?
But not only in the beaches. No, because let's say the first month I enjoyed. Let's say days off in order to travel all around Sri Lanka, even if it was very, very fast. So I try to see. This cultural triangle. And I try to see the mountains, and I try to see the beaches, of course, and a mix of the beaches and nature, which is, let's say, Yala National Park, which is a beautiful national park. And so maybe, one of my best memories and is that part of the country, because it is still unspoiled. Yeah.
Still unspoiled.
Leopards on the beach. That's it.
Still unspoiled indeed, Mr. Ambassador. A final question, where do you see Sri Lanka in the next 5 years?
Frankly speaking, Sri Lanka right now has received last year 1.8 million tourists. Sri Lanka is 21 million of people. Malaysia is 28 million of people, which is roughly the same. And Malaysia last year had 27 million of people. So of course there is Singapore, which is very close from Malaysia. But so I hope that Sri Lanka in the next 5 years will get the country well known for, let's say, 4, 5, 6, 7 million of people coming from Western Europe, coming from the Far East, China, Korea, Japan. That's my wish for the country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for joining us this evening. A pleasure was all mine to interview.
Thank you.